What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here, joined by Justis Mosqueda from ACME Packing Company, the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to anything and everything Green Bay Packers. Justis, how are you today, man?
I'm doing good. Not that chilly outside. I know I'm wearing a beanie, but not freezing cold, so I'll take it.
Wait. In your part of the world, what is not freezing cold? What's the temp hanging at today?
Freezing.
You're such a wimp. You're such a wimp. You're so West Coast.
I know, man.
But we, speaking of cold, Matt LaFleur not wasting any time, pulling the trigger already on his coaching staff. We've got a couple developments already in the works as far as what he announced at his season-ending press conference regarding Tom Clements retiring. We'll get to that in a bit, but the news yesterday from ESPN and then announced today by the Green Bay Packers, the defensive line coach, Jason Rebrovich, he's out the door officially. And this is something you had been, I guess the phrase isn't vocal about because we're all on Twitter and online or whatever. So I guess you had been pixelating about all season long. Let me ask you two questions. First up, why were you so down on Rebrovich throughout the season, other than the obvious, right? We could all see the pass rush wasn't getting home. Defensive line really wasn't doing anything consistently when it came to getting the quarterback off the spot. And two, with that said, were you surprised that LaFleur acted so quickly?
No, because you have to get to market, right? You want to get these interviews because you never know how quickly this stuff is going to get moving. It's very weird, right? Like, how many guys did the Packers bring in for DC that they ended up, right, or league wide guys that got interviews, right? Like Campanelli, right? He was getting DC interviews, and then immediately it was like, okay, he's not going to get the DC job, but he's going to sign with somewhere, and it's like you got to move now if you want to sign those guys.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised about the timing at all. I mean, this is kind of when you make your firings for the positional coach level. As far as surprise from like on the field perspective, I'm not surprised at all by that. I thought Rebrovich did a pretty poor job this year, just in terms of it seemed like they almost wanted to declare before the snap, like, hey, we are playing contain on the quarterback, or hey, we are rushing the passer, right?
Right.
There are plenty of teams that manage to do both at the same time. And I think that first touchdown that Hurts had in the playoff game where he's sitting back there,
for 7 seconds. Yeah, that's pretty damning.
A horrendous look for him. The other thing too, so if you guys remember, Mike Smith was the guy who like actually developed Rashawn Gary.
Yes.
Right. Once Mike Smith leaves, that's kind of when we stop seeing the pass rush start ticking up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jerry Montgomery was the D-line coach previously, but he was the D-line of the 3-4. So he's essentially, coaching guys who in this scheme would just be defensive tackles, right? Jerry Montgomery was hired under Dom Capers, and he lasted up until this past year. He survived.
And he kept throwing out Dean Lowry, even when everything told you not to.
So he survived 3 defensive coordinators. That was a pretty big surprise. We hadn't developed really an interior defensive lineman over that time, right? And then Rebrovich survives the Barry to Halfley transition, and not only survives, but actually gets a promotion. He's not only in charge of the pass rushers on the edge anymore, he's in charge of the entire defensive line. And I think we saw regression in Gary. We saw regression in Clark. We didn't see any sort of improvement from guys like Enigbare, LVN, Wyatt. And the talk of, we would like to just rush with 4 defensive linemen and play coverage behind it from both LaFleur and Goot kind of signaled like, yeah, we don't think that this is a personnel problem. And then once Goot said, essentially he was like, we have the right guys in the building. I'm paraphrasing now.
But yes, exactly.
He essentially said that. I was like, dude, it is your days are numbered. And then, a couple hours later, he ends up getting fired. So I'm not shocked at all. I'm pretty optimistic about White Cotton, the one guy who's tied to the opening right now.
Right. The NFL Network reported that shortly after the firing was reported. And it's funny to me. I'm glad you brought that up because to me, that's clearly you're talking about getting to market, right? I think that's direct because everyone's drawing the line to Saleh there, right? Which I make total sense. But to me, I don't think it's Robert Saleh saying, hey, you should check this guy out, or hey, this is a guy that could be really good for you. I think that's Matt trying to get ahead of Saleh, because Saleh's interviewing for head coaching jobs. And even if he doesn't get one, he's going to be a DC
He's
somewhere.
going to be a DC.
And he's had White Cotton wherever he's been. So I think that's LaFleur trying to like get in ahead of Saleh. That's my guess anyway.
And White Cotton wasn't just a guy like you mentioned. He's followed him around, right? Like he isn't just a guy who was with him with the Jets. They've spent 8 years together at the NFL level, dating back to San Francisco and then Jacksonville, actually, when Saleh was still linebackers coach and stuff like that. The resume on White Cotton is really good too. So on the high end, right? Quinn Williams makes All Pro and Pro Bowler under him for the first time. That's a former first round pick. Jermaine Johnson, first round pick, made the Pro Bowl in his second season in the league. That was 2023. He was hurt this past year. That's why you didn't hear anything about him. And then Will McDonald, who has picked a couple picks after Lucas Van Ness just posted 10.5 sacks, right? And I'm of the same opinion that the Packers front office obviously was, that Lucas Van Ness was the better prospect than Will McDonald. I know Will McDonald is more of a pure pass rusher, but I thought LVN was a better pure prospect. So that's 3 out of 3 on first round picks developing on the defensive line. Something that, I mean, how many times have you heard?
Been ages. It's been ages. It's been ages in Green Bay. We know this. Yeah, no doubt.
Right. And then not only that, but they're kind of squeezing blood out of a stone a couple times too, right? So John Franklin,
if you're talking about undrafted guys or late round guys, no question about it. And it's got to be disconcerting if you're Goot or even Matt looking at guys who are undrafted or late round picks out snapping LVN, because he just is. It's just a void mostly, right? At this point in his career. Now that doesn't mean it can't take off, hopefully under better tutelage, but that's got to be. I mean, it's damning, but it's concerning a little bit if you're Gutekunst and you're thinking, I did invest a pretty significant pick in this kid, and he can't get on the field, let alone be productive. He can't get on the field.
Right. The one good thing about White Cotton too is it really, it's not just first round picks either. It really seems like he gets the most out of guys. So like John Franklin Myers was waived by the Rams. They did not want him. Gets picked up in a year and a half. The Jets hand him a 4-year, $55 million contract. Right. Bryce Huff, undrafted player when the Jets signed him, ends up getting 10 sacks last year as a pass rush specialist. Didn't even record a start. Signed a 3-year, $51 million contract with the Eagles as a free agent this past offseason. Dating back to when they were together in San Francisco, they signed Kerry Hyder off of the street. $1.5 million 1-year deal. He ends up getting 8.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. Like that, the resume on White Cotton is good. Whether that will translate to Green Bay, who knows? But if you're looking at bona fides and outside hires and all that stuff, it seems like this is a coach who would be wanted at other spots in the NFL. And the Packers aren't shying away from paying him, right? And I think those are the two things that I would want to see the most. Because I know on the offensive side, to a certain extent, like Matt's just going to want his guys, right? And it's understandable that it's just going to kind of be like a ladder where guys, move up and progress, and they're not really going to be looking at outside guys. But on the defensive side, right? I mean, it started with keeping Pettin because they didn't want to pay the buyout, right?
Yeah.
And then you hire Joe Barry because there's previous experience there between him or previous.
There's a relationship from their time together,
right,
staff.
exactly, between Matt and Barry. And I don't know if Barry was really a guy who was wanted. So it's nice to be able to go after an Ansley, who is a defensive coordinator for the Chargers, make him a positional coach. He's getting defensive coordinator interviews right now. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
A Campanelli who had interviewed for DC. The one position that they really hadn't addressed and they kind of just rolled over for a year was the defensive line. So it's nice to, see them actually attacking this and saying like, all right, this is a problem. We have to throw money at it, and we're not going to go the cheap route.
Especially
I think that's positive.
I think especially given his experience, not just obviously the Saleh connection, but with the scheme that they're trying to run. This is something that he's going to be well versed in. Whereas with Rebrovich, it was clear it was nothing that he was used to. He didn't really have any touch of it in his past, other than having worked with Saleh, but that wasn't even in the same kind of scheme.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that it makes a world of sense. We'll see. It's funny though, because we're talking about it. It's obviously been reported. Now watch someone else swoop in and take him. That would be the Packer way, my friend. But let's look on the other side of the ball, because, like I said, the other kind of announcement Matt made was that Tom Clements is retiring. A lot of gnashing of teeth, wringing of hands from Packers fans, which I understand. But I am kind of fascinated to see where LaFleur goes with this, because you look on staff and, man, no one screams, well, this is obvious, right? Like, I know Sean Mannion was mentioned at the press conference. He's literally been an NFL coach for a year. And I know he played in the league. He knows the position. But a year he's been in the building and even on a staff. And then you look at Connor Lewis, who's been assisting Clements for like a couple years, I want to say. And he came up like he was offensive quality control a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's not a obvious, oh, we should turn to this wizened vet coach who is going to be able to, put Jordan Love under his tutelage. I'm just wondering if you think, is there someone on staff that you think makes this kind of transition? We've seen it back in the Packers history. It has happened. Or do you think Matt LaFleur looks outside the building?
What do you define as outside the building? Because Getsy's hanging around.
Well, Getsy is in the building officially. He's
Right.
he's getting paid, or he
Right.
was in season, right? That would be wild to me, though. It was so funny, because remember when Clements came in and everyone was like, "Oh, that first year with Getsy was so bad," and it was just Jordan was just young, right, and had no off season, whatever. But it was like the shine was totally off Getsy. But now, if they did bring him back, he would be kind of the vet version of what they're probably looking for. So yeah, that's a possibility, I suppose. Definitely.
I think it's going to tell us a lot more of what LaFleur envisions that coach to be than anything else, right? Because Clements comes in and he is like the guru, right? I mean, he is like, we're going to tighten down your footwork, all this stuff, and work on stuff like that. But when your head coach comes from a play calling background and he comes from, a quarterback coaching background, play quarterback, right, at the college level, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Those guys can kind of be viewed as like assistants, and I don't mean like assistant coaches. I mean like genuinely assistants, right? Where like Adam Stanovich's job as offensive coordinator is very different than what Luke Getsy's job as offensive coordinator and play caller was for the Bears.
Right.
Like Stanovich is helping a lot with like meetings and prep and stuff like that to take that off of LaFleur's plate so that LaFleur can still be in those meetings and have it be a valuable use of his time while also running all the other aspects of the team. Right. So if it's Connor Lewis, that would be really interesting. I know a guy who worked with Connor Lewis in the past. He's more of like an analytics guy and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's how he came up.
Exactly.
Pure numbers guy. Yeah, definitely.
And I've only heard good things about him. But if Connor Lewis is the hire, I think that would say like assistant. Right? Like that's an assistant for Matt who gets a quarterback's coach.
Yeah, and Matt is coaching the quarterbacks.
Right, exactly.
Essentially, right? I mean, it worked for Mike Holmgren.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think Gutsy is interesting because he's kind of been he did coach the quarterbacks and all that stuff.
Right.
I don't know what happens with the offensive coordinator situation if Stanovich gets poached somewhere else for a play calling opportunity. Right. I think that if that happens, I think Getsy's first name up. So I could see like Getsy being OC and then you still having that whole at quarterback coach.
Yeah, I think the Getsy thing is interesting. I also think Vrabel's got a possibility. He's coaching at the Senior Bowl, and I do think he's been kind of on the rise in Matt's staff. If you watch, kind of his trajectory.
Wide receiver coach, BGC, like, I mean, he's definitely next man up because like all those other guys, like outside of so if Stanovich gets hired out, basically that entire first staff has been
is out the door except for one name.
Vrabel.
Ben Searmans, who will
the running backs
be a running backs coach forever. I'm just resigning myself to it because it's crazy. He's been there. He was on McCarthy's staff.
Yeah.
And he's still there. And he hasn't moved. Like that's wild to me. And he's done, from the outside looking in, a pretty damn good job with whoever he's been given.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's wild to me. But yeah, he would be the one holdover from the original staff on offense.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, even Outen, right? Like the original tight ends coach, he ended up being OC.
He went to Denver, and then I think I think he might still be with, or no, he was with the Titans. I don't think he's on that staff this year. I'm not sure where he is now.
And then the other name you mentioned, Mannion, ties together, right? Like LaFleur's had him in the past. I know Orlovsky's kind of made a play a little bit on
again, right? Yeah, making that public play. I mean, look, I'm never going to say never, but I would be surprised. I would be very surprised if they brought Dan Orlovsky in to coach quarterbacks.
I think it's interesting. Orlovsky does this always when his ESPN contract is up, and I'll leave it at that.
Fascinating, right? Fascinating.
It's a good move.
It's a smart move, no question about it. It's a good bargaining chip, undoubtedly. Justis, I cannot thank you enough for the time. Make sure you're checking out his stuff there at ACME Packing Company. I know you just had a piece go up earlier today regarding realistic free agent targets for the Green Bay Packers. I'm sure Packers fans will want to read that. We'll have that linked in the description of this video. Justis, thanks so much, man.